Hey guys, this is Simon from Fateless. Welcome back to the YouTube channel and one of our developer updates. Today we're going to be doing a behind the scenes look at our announced trailer, a cinematic experience for Godforge. This will be really cool actually. So you get to see the original storyboards for the trailer. You get to see some of the work as it was developed along the process over the last sort of whatever it was, near enough 9 months, I think. And basically look through the different processes, including things like the mocap that went on behind the scenes, some of the scene setting and how that kind of like developed over time. And yeah, ultimately get to the final piece where we had to make some quite hard decisions. So elements of the original boards were cut to enable us to fit in the sort of time frame that we had in our budget, that type of stuff. So super cool video, strap in. And I guess we're going to start with some work which Safari did. Safari was the director from Narwhal Studios who basically has pulled together like a 2-minute clip just showing some of these elements, and then we'll deep dive after that. So look, I would say if that's all I was going to show in this video, it would already be a really cool video. Like Safari's like breakdown there of different elements that he's worked on was brilliant. There is this blog, which I'm going to link down below, which is the Safari and Felix blog. Basically, they're two of the leads from the Narwhal side, now gone off to do their own thing and basically formed a new company. But yeah, two of the leads from Narwhal who basically built this trailer for us, and they break it down in detail. We're going to go through this article and kind of like pull out some really cool points, but feel free to go in your own time and check it out as well. As I say, be linked down below. Let's start with the team behind the announced trailer. So myself and Sham are kind of like leading from, you know, the founders of Fateless. We actually first started to work with Jerry. Jerry ended up being our executive producer. He's ex-Riot. I spoke about him a number of times. Extremely creative, absolute legend, and is also helping us with some of the, I guess, boss style visuals in game right now, which is going to be super sweet to get his input because he's just really creative and an awesome guy. He introduced us to Mike Berry. Mike Berry ended up being the director from the Fateless side and came on specifically to work on this announced trailer, the cinematic. Since then, actually, he came on as like an outsource, but since he's come into the team in full as our Chief Marketing Officer because he loved working with us and we loved working with him. So absolutely brilliant guy. And you saw in the clip there that we just showed from Safari, he actually did some of the kind of like mocap animation that the guys use. So really cool. We've got Dane, our art director in-house. So again, that's a Fateless person, just making sure that the heroes, you know, met our requirements, met our visuals that we wanted to land, and came on I guess really about a bunch of the creative decisions that we made. And then key leads from the Narwhal side were Mark. So Mark did a lot of the previs, which we'll go into shortly, which is kind of like setting up the shots, really, making sure that the shots land and fit the boards. We had Safari, who did tons of work, honestly, but he led the teams around, I guess, delivering the piece once we got past that previs. And then Natasha was doing a lot of the production from the Narwhal side. So really, really, I guess, lean team, but super high performers, like really, really cool. Let's talk about the storyboard. This was done before Narwhal really even got involved. We had Lanny McCuskey, who did the storyboarding for us. I mean, this guy's ability to just sketch out a vision at pace was nuts, honestly. So, and he worked extremely closely with Mike to basically try and create our vision. We actually started off with 3 different ideas for what this story could look like. Lanny took one of them, or we agreed on one of them, and then he kind of moved it in a direction. And what he's doing here is he's trying to lay out the shots for, you know, a company like Narwhal to be able to replicate in that kind of like high fidelity. So it's much quicker to get this iterative process on sketches than it is obviously if you're using really expensive characters and stuff. So what's going on? As we saw in the final piece, we have this kind of like this tilt into an environment, tilt into a battle. You can see here Ra is still in the sort of center. A lot of the original boards for this first shot stayed in. Yeah, and it was like to set the scene. There's someone in the middle, and then he's going to create some sort of explosion. So all of those first elements kind of stayed in. We get the big explosion, and then we zoom in and we see Ra for the first time a bit closer up, battling a couple of foes that are still up after he's done his nuke. We sort of see him take down one, and then we just see this kind of like little dude jumping in at the end, which we get the neck grab of, right? So again, all of this first element stayed in, and this was like the first proper hero shot of Ra, where you really felt how powerful he is. Yeah, and that's what we wanted to get across. Ra lays the laser beam down on him, this basically calls on the power of the sun and disintegrates him. And again, all of these original elements we managed to get in, and then we sort of pan across with the disintegration of the dude into a new scene. And the new scene actually was slightly different in our board. So what we wanted to do, again, budget, number of characters we were allowed to create, time for the piece, all of those things play a part here. So we wanted to sort of start with Gilgamesh's footsteps coming in, and to show that he's already slain, almost like a guardian of the Aetherwell. Okay, and actually what we wanted that to be originally was like a Cyclops, or I guess we spoke about a number of different beings or creatures that it could be. We wanted it to be a one-shot piece where someone knew exactly the enemy he had to slay, and Cyclops felt like a good one for that. So originally he would have been walking past Cyclops, which is basically already taken down. He then gets in, and we see this kind of like close-up of the Aetherwell. We look over the top of it, and then we see this mysterious figure, which eventually is Gilgamesh, standing in the shadows as he kind of like now makes his way into the room. So it would have been a different, I guess, approach for Gilgamesh. It would have been pretty cool, actually. But again, we ran out of time in our piece to be able to do it that way. But still the same theme was there. We've got the crow coming in. We've got Gilgamesh arriving. And we still get this kind of like pan and flight path of the crow for our shots. We get the nice close-up after it lands on the Aetherwell. And then he flies away to be replaced by Gilgamesh kind of like using his, what do you call it? His fire stick, but that's not the word for it. You know what I mean? Anyway, coming across his face. Now, in the original one, we had him sort of toss it away, and then we wanted a bit more kind of like emotional impact of him, almost like, I found the Aetherwell. And like for him to, you know, really sort of feel like emotionally this is a really difficult thing for him to do. And you see he's kind of like coming in, touching the chalice here, and we get kind of like this top-down view now. We also see him then grab something out of his kind of like satchel or out of his robe, and we see him kind of like almost tearing up, looking into the Aetherwell. We then flip back. Okay, so we're now cutting back to scene, and this is the Brunhild introduction. In the original, she's actually reaching down and touching a fallen hero, you know, one of her squad who's been nuked by Ra. We actually changed it in the final one to what I think is a much cooler version, where she's basically kneeling down amongst the ashes of a dude, but it's the same sort of vibe. So ultimately it ends up being the same shot, and then we kind of like come up, and we see that she's properly mad, right? It's the first time she's like, I'm both sad about my dude that's gone down, but I am angry and I'm going to make stuff happen. Okay, we then get back to Gilgamesh. We realize what he's pulled out of his pouch here is like this crystal, okay? And it was almost like originally we wanted it to feel like a bit of a ritual, and he's like crushing the crystal in his hand. And what that's doing is it's releasing energy for Gilgamesh. So you can see the sort of energy coming out. And as he does it, you can see all the different sort of flames sputtering in the room. And we then get a shot of the sort of close-up of him with the crushed crystals in his hand, which he then would have thrown into the Aether Well. And we would have seen like the divinity in the well start to corrupt. Okay? So again, different visual. It would have taken a lot more time. We'd had a lot more focus on that scene. And as that happens, we would have then seen these kind of like tracks in the floor start to fill up with this now corrupted divinity, almost like a chain reaction is taking place. We then would see Gilgamesh looking down at his hands and see the hands are kind of like becoming infused with this sort of corrupted power. And then as he reaches back for his axe, which is still in the main shot, we can see that sort of power start to take force on the axe. Cut back to Ra, and he's got his kind of like stave here inside a dude, which he then pulls up. We kept that in the shot. We did have a slight different original plan, which we actually built out fully, just didn't really feel like it worked in the end. We see him look down, and there's just like this glint in a shield, which is actually a glint off of Brunhild's armor. So the reason why he looks back in the original plans was because he's seen this kind of like light reflection off of the shield. Then he's looking back to see what's coming at him. So we changed that slightly because it just didn't really read that well when we actually kind of like played it all through. Okay, we then get the pan back to Gilgamesh here, and Gilgamesh is kind of like closed eyes into angry face, determined face as he goes in for the wreck. We then pan back again, and we did a lot more kind of like originally switching from one scene to the next. It was too disorientated eventually, but you can see we go from Gilgamesh starting to swing his axe, back to the sort of Ra Brunhild shot, back to Gilgamesh crushing through the Aether Well, back to Ra Brunhild. So it was just a lot more camera cuts and felt too disorientating for the viewer, considering they don't know all of the context that I know. Okay, and then we get the smash of the Aether Well, the power going over Gilgamesh, which we kept in. We get the hit onto Ra, but in the original concept, instead of the spear kind of like actually embedded in the armor, we kind of thought of the idea of maybe like the scarab in the center of his armor being like crushed off, and then just kind of like a cool flying through the air scene, which we then stay on. We then get the big imposing Ra's coming up, real close up of him, overshadowing Brunhild. In the original shot, and I think we got some of this I could show you, he actually pulls out two weapons from dudes on the floor. As he does it, they just fly through the air. It was pretty comic. It was too comic, really, for the vibe we wanted. And then we get the conflict at the end. So, damn. The boards have actually ended up being pretty damn close to the final piece, but you can see we had to make some creative decisions and changes to eventually get to our final trailer. Okay, so again, like, super cool. I actually love reliving some of the process that we did here. So let's just go through this blog. I'll stop in different elements and just kind of like walk you through what's going on. So originally, it was a case of, you know, the team from Narwhal pitching to us at Fateless why they thought they were going to be the right team to get this done, you know, showing us some of their previous projects, their previous work, walking through the different deliverables that we wanted to hit. So, you know, this fully rendered cinematic with about 1 minute 15, developing storyboards or working to our storyboards, giving us a behind the scenes footage, i.e. this. Yeah, so super cool. We then worked through, you know, some mood boards of the original kind of different concepts. Two areas really, that kind of like Nordic area and then the tomb area. And it was just like, you know, different visuals for us to reference when we start to build out the main piece. We walked through how long it should take and the different elements of it. So pre-production, all of the production elements with so pre-production is kind of like a lot of the previs. And we then get into production where we do the mocap, which is kind of like people acting out different shots, which we then bring into the project, animation, sequencing, all of the visual effects, the cloth, the hair rendering, all of that work and then we go into post-production where it's kind of like a lot of the lighting and basically getting us to our final piece of work. In terms of the characters then, I'm a big fan. I don't know if you've realized this, but I call it out pretty much every time I'm talking about this cinematic. I love the League of Legends ones. Like the League of Legends season starters are some of my favorite pieces of work. And a lot of that is because of the way it inspires emotion in me when I watch them. Even if I watched them 10 times before, I still get that same feeling again. I also am a massive fan of the World of Warcraft, kind of different cinematics that they do. So we were just kind of like looking at shots, you know, trying to get that, I guess, evidence of where you really feel that emotion build, where they've really done a kind of like cool visual effects, cool armor pieces. Like, again, just references for the Narwhal guys to sort of, I guess, share with us. These are the elements that we think you want. So a lot of this was just them presenting to us and us saying, yep, you're on the right track, or actually, no, that's not quite right for us. Looking at, again, some different environments and how they could be built out. So you can see, again, on the left here, a lot of the sort of Nordic feel, and on the right here, the sort of, I guess, a feel for like the cavern and, you know, the area where the Aetherwell would sit. I think this is a trail in the Neverending Story, if I remember rightly here, but this kind of like atmospheric type of feel down here. And then, yeah, that was a kind of like main pitch to us. We really liked their work. We really liked what they were doing. So we then start to kind of like obviously get into play, going through the boards, like talking through what we want from the different shots. And ultimately, we then get, I guess we get some of the different animatics start to come through. So really early previs. Let me share this with you because it's very cool. So you can see some of the shots start to be mocked out very early, right? But it's just basically grabbing the boards and making sure that we get timing right. We start to get the kind of like elements in play super early, but it's helpful to make sure that we understand, everyone understands that we're on the right path. And yeah, there was this kind of like early previs, early blockouts being done. And I remember seeing some of this stuff and I'm like, oh, I wonder how it starts to become the final piece, because, you know, we had very high expectations for what we were looking for. Mark was doing a lot of this previs work. Mark Austin, you know, he's worked on insane projects through the years and really cool guy, actually. We then started to look at some concepting for different characters in the game and different environments. So there was some AI used to do very early exploration. It's like, how do we do exploration at pace? AI is the answer to that. And we actually do it in Fateless for a number of areas where it's like AI at pace using our characters or our visuals. And then we then have our artists come in and do all of any refinement, that type of stuff. So you can see some of these sort of early shots of, you know, what we thought Brunhild could look like in this higher resed version of her kind of like in-game character. And yeah, this is just kind of like these up-res tools which are used, which is cool. We have a bunch of kind of like references. We have a number of meetings where we're talking about elements like, you know, what do we want the Aetherwell to look like? What type of energy types are we going to use when we need it? Do we want it to feel, we had this conversation a lot actually. It's like, we don't want things to feel alien. We want them to feel extremely old, like ancient tech. So number of different sort of exploration things in a mood board here. Same sort of thing with environments. Again, we're just kind of like mood boarding out different elements that we could use, which is very cool. We then got on building out Ra. So we had the kind of initial concept, which we built in Fateless. A number of you actually mentioned the wings. So originally we had the wings in the concept. Up until very late, actually, we kept the wings in the final cinematic trailer as well. You can see them already built in the model here. But the silhouette of the hero or the villain in the shots didn't feel right when we were on that kind of like, you know, really trying to silhouette them against the background. So we decided to just take them off in the end. But until very late, they were actually in all the shots. But you can see they just did a bit of rework versus the Ra we've built in 3D for the game. They just rebuilt some proportions so that it worked for the sort of size we needed him to be versus Brunhild in the shots. Again, you can see some early sort of mock-ups of Brunhild with the close-up shots and what they obviously eventually became, which is very cool. a lot of work that went into Gilgamesh. Honestly, some of the shots earlier at Gilgamesh, I was like, I don't think this one's going to hit. I don't think it's going to get there. But so much work went on to making sure that he had that kind of like, you know, the roughness of the beard with the sort of braids in it, the kind of like the fierce look. Yeah, super work in the end from Safari and the team. And Mike, honestly, supporting with what that could look like. You can see things here in Ra's kind of like makeup. So the way they took him from the actual shot to adding in all of the sort of post lighting effects to really sort of ramp up his power. And again, both shots are cool, right? But it's just, it needed to feel like we wanted it to feel for the whole piece. You can see as well. So there was an element for Brunhild where I was like, she needs to feel, even though she's like a warrior, you know, Valkyrie, she needs to still feel kind of sexy as well. Sexy in like a strong way, warrior, princess type of way. So, you know, we did a lot of work in terms of just slightly changing mouth shapes, eye shapes, all of these things to really try and sell like her shout. And again, we had these different references here that we were using as I guess, yeah, support for us to make sure that we're hitting the right notes when it comes to key moments of the trailer. This was Gilgamesh originally, so damn, he moved on, right? But it was like, let's just block him out, let's just get him into the right shapes, the right sort of strengths. Dane did a lot of work just making sure that all the proportions became good. We got the right call outs from our concepting. You know, we got hair and beards to look good and sort of follow through on his whole body. Yeah, tons of work on that side. Things like the chalice room then. So we looked at a lot of different elements and we got some of these in terms of, you know, how do we want the stairs to feel? How do we want the different structures to look? As I say, old, ancient, and I guess my reference in my head was kind of like thinking of like Apocalypse in X-Men. You know, it's almost like it's this ancient entity, but he's not an alien. He's not brought alien technology. He's just been around almost like for a generation of humans that have then come back again type of vibe. So that's what we wanted this environment to feel like. Now, I'm gonna play this one through because it's actually super cool. We actually had on this one a original soundtrack so that we could just get the timing right whilst Serena was working through her soundtrack. So you can see the original block out here, or relatively early. The grab. The early models. So we kept some of the original shots in. Look at the arms coming out. See that part there where the arms fly the two dudes out? This is what we originally had. The dudes fly off and he nicks their weapons. So you can see, I mean, even at that point when I first saw that, I was like, damn, this is already feeling cool. And you can see how much it changed obviously since that point. So really, really cool seeing some of the early stuff. Here is some of the early work that Mike did around just mocap work. So Mike Berry just sort of being like, we couldn't land all of the shots right. It's like, look, no, this is how I want it to feel. You can see Mike here on the left, just like basically being both Ra and being the dude that gets caught. So Mike Berry gets props for that. And these were the references then that the guys tried to capture. And just looking at the sort of, you know, the physics of someone being caught, all of that stuff was really fun actually. let's just come down here. So now we start to see some like behind the scenes shots of what it actually looks like in Unreal as they're rendering out these different shots and all the different elements that are going into it, which is super cool because, you know, to achieve the sort of look we got with Ra overshadowing Brunhilde by so much, you know, it was a lot of camera trickery to get that to happen. And you can see here the sort of different camera shots that we've got in play, which you would have seen if you looked at the original clip I showed from Safari. You can see again some of the different mocap references and mocap being created from the team. Like just such good work, honestly. You can see this one's super short, but this was the sort of previous shot on the right hand side here, and then we've got the final shot before it's all rendered out in full quality. But you can see the sort of difference that we went with in the end. We actually didn't have anything sticking him in first place, but like, no, something's got to end up landing in him to really sell the break. So yeah, lots of, honestly, just so much that went through this piece of work to eventually get us to a final edit. Now I use DaVinci Resolve for editing videos for YouTube and stuff. My timelines do not look like this. Like, I guess I would have assumed they just use far more advanced technology or whatever, but same technology I use. Anyway, I think that's going to cap it off. I'll just let this end with the final piece of work, which you guys would have seen before, but full trailer coming next. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one.